Hello, everyone. Welcome to the GLORIO Chat, the best anime podcast on the internet. I hope everyone got to enjoy some time off over the holidays here. 2021 is now officially over. Good riddance. I kind of feel like 2020 and 2021 were just like one long 24 episode series. Just nonstop.
That's certainly a way one could put it.
We're basically on the third.
Is it are you saying it was the latest hate watch?
Yes, we hate watched 2020.
Now, let's be
for 2
reasonable
years.
here. There was a global pandemic, but it might not be as bad as hate watch levels.
It's close. I watched some bad shows for hate watch, so I don't know. But anyway, if the world may be a dumpster fire, but we did at least have some good anime.
Yeah, I would say so. I think
past year?
2021 was a very strong year for anime, especially considering the circumstances in which a lot of this anime was made. I think that it's I think I'd go as far as say this is a uniquely strong year for anime. I mean, I think this top 10 is going to illustrate that, especially as we...
I do feel like if the pandemic had not happened, some of these shows probably would have been in 2020.
I think you're right, but,
would have been spread out a little more.
I think perhaps one or two of them might have had slightly smoother productions, but it's very difficult to say.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But yes, as we just mentioned, as we do at the end of every year, we do our year in review posts. You can go check those out at theglorioblog.com. And of course, the final one we put out is our top 10 anime of the year. And that's what we're going to talk about today. So, before we get started, let me introduce everybody. I'm Jel. I'm joined by Iro.
I'm still here. I'm not dead yet.
Still with us in 2022. And we're joined by G.
So I'm just going to point out that when you say it out loud, the year is pronounced 2022. And my question is 2022 going to be the Final Fantasy X-2 or the Final Fantasy 13-2 of years?
I mean, I guess one of these is nominally better than the other.
Is this the year of the dress sphere?
I mean, I will defend Final Fantasy X-2. It is a fun, weird game.
It ain't no 13-2, that's for sure. I'm saying
Yeah,
that
I think we're
better.
saying 10-2 is the good one, right?
Yes.
Or okay, how about this? Is this a Bravely Second situation, where 2020 was Bravely Second, the first, 2021 was Bravely, what was it, like Bravely Second? No, like Bravely Third or something.
There's Bravely Default.
There's
Bravely
Default.
Second, the sequel to Bravely Default, and then there's Bravely Default 2, which is an all-new scenario.
Thank you. I have gotten the names mixed up. So then, is this the Bravely Default 2 of years?
Ooh, I don't know. I want to say, new year, new start.
So
things will be great,
for the
but
top two.
Cannot say that. Yeah. Anyway, we're also joined by Zig for this episode.
I prefer to avoid confusion by simply referring to this year as the year of Luigi plus 9, or year 9 of the Luigi age.
Has it actually been that long? Or
Yes.
All right.
Yes, the year of Luigi was 2013.
It's like when you play
Jesus
New Game Plus in
Christ.
Dark Souls. It's like New Game Plus 6.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, man.
Wow.
Or you have BAL before the age of Luigi, and AAL after the age of Luigi.
Save us,
Okay.
Luigi.
Yeah, like the common era, but with Luigi.
Right. That makes perfect sense. Oh, God, we've been doing this a long time. This is also going to be our 10th anniversary this year, but we'll get to that in 6 months.
Yeah, sure is.
Anyway, we're here today to talk about the 10 best anime of 2021, as declared by the GLORIO blog, which means they are the correct top 10, of course.
Of course.
Well, you know, with some caveats, but yes.
Well,
is that caveat mostly that we did not finish Thunderbolt Fantasy season 3.
That is caveat number 1 for sure.
Yeah. So before we get into the actual top 10, if you guys have any honorable mentions you want to get out of the way of things that didn't make the list. We just mentioned
I will say,
Thunderbolt
there
Fantasy.
Were so many. Yeah, there were so many good shows this year that like our voting process, I would say, did not allow for. I had to make some tough choices.
I think we all did, really.
Yeah, exactly.
I left off stuff that I
think everybody has like a cut from their top 5 that they feel bad about, but is also like, what can you do in a year this competitive?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's very top heavy. So like, I think everybody's lists like, well, you have to put these at the top.
So like, that's.
Just to clarify, for people who don't know, we like everybody on the blog votes for a top 5 shows, and they're weighted according to rank, and it's all score based and stuff like that.
And,
right.
Not to get like too inside baseball, but like that does mean that like, yes, as hinted at, it does mean that, right, like our lists do tend to like take on a certain like order as a result of that, right? Because of the inherent nature of like voting for a top 5 for a top 10, which means that there are some shows that you didn't make it here, not because they're bad, but because they would be many people's top 6 or 7, right? And like in past years, that wasn't an issue, because I think there's some years of the GLORIO blog where some of us struggled to even put together a list of 5. But in a year like this, where I think many of us could actually put together a credible, like, personal top 10 list, no less a site-wide top 10 list. There ends up being some stuff that just kind of just falls through the cracks.
Yeah.
Yep.
So we definitely put the system to the test this year, but we made it. We're here. But if you guys want to shout out any other shows that didn't make the list, now's the time. So.
Yeah, I mean, this is where I now make the like legitimate argument that if we had all watched it, I assure you, Thunderbolt Fantasy Season 3 would be in our top 5. Like, this is not. There's no, like, I'm telling you all, look at your top 5 list, something would go. Like, because Thunderbolt Fantasy Season 3 would take that spot. And the only reason it isn't is because most of us only started the entire franchise this year and did not catch up on Season 3 in time. But Eero and I finished it the other day, and I don't know, Eero, you tell me.
I thought it was pretty good. Man, I will say I'm a little miffed that we started catching up with Thunderbolt Fantasy when this franchise's plot as a whole is like in the middle of the middle.
When Urobuchi announced that he plans to do 5 seasons and I believe 5 films for Thunderbolt Fantasy, we realized upon reaching the end of Season 3, oh crap, that means we got into this series at exactly the 50% mark.
Right. In a cliffhanger zone.
Yes. But
so they left us on a cliffhanger in Season 3.
So that's the thing. Season 3 is very much the part of where Thunderbolt Fantasy as a series becomes confident enough in your investment in its characters and like grander meta narrative that it feels confident enough to like leave you hanging, right? Like Season 3 still finishes up and addresses the kind of primary conflict of the story, but introduces these grander stakes that are not immediately addressed. And it's really good.
I would argue even Season 2, just like while it hinted at more to come, it broadly wrapped up itself.
Yes.
And while Season 3 also like wraps up itself, it has way more of and we need to wrap up all of these other plot threads.
Right. But yeah, it's just, I don't know. I'm just like, as someone who literally started watching that series this year, like making it to Season 3, I'm amazed at how well and how consistently they keep up the energy. Like, they don't skip a beat, right? Like 3 seasons in, 2 full-length movies. And we're still
excited, yeah.
Yeah, you're still just as excited, if not more, for
yeah, I mean, that is impressive
happening.
To stay consistent over that long period of time. Especially even just in the couple episodes I've watched so far, where literally every minute of dialogue is pure solid gold.
Oh, yeah.
how you can keep that up over 3 seasons.
Right, and it's like they get even more confident in that going forward, right? It's like they're not losing their luster, they're not running out of steam. Like they're just getting like more and more like they're just getting better at it, right? Like it's not that the show's changing much, right? Season 3 is in many ways, not that different from what's going on in season 1, but it's just they're just getting better at executing it with every season. It's really, really impressive, and I think season 3's got some great moments, some great characters. Again, promise not to spoil it, but Rin Setsuwa is that man. Someone needs to stop that man because he's going too far.
God.
All right. Well, I will. Give
he
you
arguably went too far from the very beginning, so
and he's still going.
In for a penny, in for a pound.
Still going, making nendoroids left and right.
God, yes. But,
yeah.
Just had to give it the shout out because I do think that if enough of us had finished it this season or this year,
be a contender.
All right.
I think people would definitely be talking about it because
that was put it on. Definitely delayed from last year.
Sure, yeah.
I'm gonna put it on tape. My personal guarantee that I will finish all of it by season 4.
I mean, you're probably fine because they still haven't even announced the 3rd movie yet.
Yeah, God knows when that'll be.
I'm sure though they can spring that up on us at any time. But
sure.
It's kind of difficult to make a puppet movie by remote work. So,
right, exactly.
Yeah.
But yeah, now we're those people. If there's any development that defines 2021, it's we became those people who are now talking about that puppet battle show.
Yes. All right. I will definitely catch up with that. Especially if next season looks as bad as I think it is. But that's another topic for another day.
Sure.
Anything else we want to shout out that didn't make the list?
Like I would never put it on a best of the year list, but Aquagaze and I have been watching Tropical Rouge Precure, and it's very, very fun, and we have developed an irrational love for the cute miniature seal mascot, which Aqua wrote about in his post, so check that out. It is delightful. That's all I'll say.
What I watched of it with you folks was pretty enjoyable.
So you've gone down that rabbit hole.
It is a kids show, but they're having some fun with it. I like it a lot.
At this point, it's basically Sentai equivalent, right? Like, it's how many years straight?
Since the early 2000s, at least.
Right.
We're closing in on 20.
Almost 20 years, right?
Yeah, but it's bright, it's colourful, it's goofy. Like, it kind of has the thing that we used to get from Pokemon Sun and Moon, which is it's just nice to spend time in this colourful environment where everyone is nice and all the villains do is cause petty mischief all the time. It's pretty good.
Okay.
I guess I want to just give a brief shout out then to Godzilla Singular Point. I feel like that is a show that would personally hit maybe 6 or 7 even on my own list, but I feel like in this world where like Godzilla media or cross media is inconsistent in quality, shall we say, I think that SP was a very cool take on the premise. I think they did a good job of sort of echoing the original themes of Godzilla, but finding new modern ways to interpret them in 2021. And long live our king and savior, Jet Jaguar.
Yes, of course.
People's hero.
I'm glad we could mention Jet Jaguar at least once on this podcast episode, but yeah. All right. I'm trying to think of anything I would mention, and for some reason the first thing that comes to mind is Jujutsu Kaisen. I forgot that aired this year. I also feel weird mentioning a series that's one of the most popular things going right now. You don't
right, but I will admit, right, it is like Weekly Shonen Jump anime adaptations are sort of the racing games equivalent when it comes to anime awards. They don't come up.
You look at Jujutsu Kaisen and you go, "Wow, those wheels are really round."
Exactly. Jujutsu Kaisen is the Forza Horizon 5 of anime.
Yes.
I will point out as well that it was Crunchyroll users voted it the anime of the year. So if you need proof of mainstream penetration, that's it.
So you don't need me to tell. Nobody needs me to. What was that, Iroh?
Gran Turismo of anime adaptations?
No, because
perhaps.
that would mean
No,
that we
because
would
it
get
came
one
out.
season of Jujutsu Kaisen every 6 years.
Yeah, no, I would give it a little more credit than that. No, I mean it was more than just looked nice. I mean it was a pretty good show.
It was solid. I rewatched a couple episodes just to kind of remind myself, and it had a good energy to it.
Yeah.
And I hope they carry that going forward. I didn't do the thing of starting to read the manga afterwards, so I'm still in the dark. So I can't really speak to where that thing goes in the future. I know that movie just came out. I mean, I guess I'll probably check it out.
Prequel movie,
if it makes its way
that was
over
more of a
here,
prequel. Yeah, so
Yeah,
you heard it here first, folks. Jujutsu Kaisen. Yeah.
Good job, Sung Ho Park.
Yeah,
Probably the
Park's
second
still,
most popular thing after Demon Slayer going right
still
now.
killing it.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right.
We are down with the kids.
Let's get into our actual top 10 list.
Yes, the true
We'll
top
start-
10. Top 10 true.
Parentheses.
We'll start at number 10 with Super Cub.
So just to be clear, Joe, we're being paid for this, right?
Paid for what?
For putting
Well,
Super Cub at number 10, for putting an
Yeah, my
advert
bike's
at
coming in the
number
mail,
10.
right?
Hey, look.
You're just gonna drive it to my house, right?
I will just say I'm not the only person that voted for it, and also, if I were getting paid, then I would not have my number one not make number one every single year because my number one never makes number one.
Hey, that's my job.
Anyway, yes. So Super Cub is a series about the well, I don't know if it's about the girl or the Super Cub itself. Super Cub, of course, referring to the Honda motorcycle, which is the most produced and used vehicle in all of history, or something like that.
Well, Jill, unlike most bike anime, Super Cub is about the characters.
Yeah, unlike Bakuan.
Yes. No, it actually is. As much as I joke about the shameless product placement and whatnot, it is actually a very good slice of life series. It's definitely more in the vein of the laid back camps of the world, where it's very laid back, compared to what I think the anime version of slice of life, a lot of times we think of more of super colorful and high energy and all that, and that is not what the show is. It's very it's much more down to earth and deliberate, and I very much liked the characters and how they developed. It's not a club show, so it's not like they're in a club and they there's not a lot of school activity things going on.
Right, they're
it's
just driving around on their own time.
Yeah, it's just basically two girls bonding over their love of the Super Cub.
I mean, I think that's a smart choice if you're going to lean into the thematic elements of what these bikes represent to these characters, right? If they were just part of a club, then it would just kind of be the same old shonen, find your purpose in given school club of your choice, right? But if the point of owning the Super Cub is finding your independence, your freedom, so to speak, then I think it makes a lot more sense that it's not that they're part of a club; it's that they're riding free in the streets.
Yes, that's very much what they're going for. Yeah, because you do the club thing, then you fall into all the cliches that come with that, and it ends up being more like cute girls drinking tea and eating cake, and then occasionally talking in strange amounts of detail about whatever specific subject the show is about.
Of course.
But that is not the case here. So, so it's a very good example of this particular genre if you're into that kind of thing. All right, let's go to number 9, where we have To Your Eternity.
This somehow made it, huh?
Yeah, so this
for me, this was a show of high highs and low lows, if that makes sense. When it was
so
good,
if anybody's not familiar, this is a adaptation of a manga that a lot of the GLORIO crew has read and really liked. So we were pretty excited about it. The adaptation was not always great, but as I was thinking about it, if you removed, and this is a big if.
What are you about to say?
If you removed the final third of the series, which is what we refer to as the Crime Island arc, it was actually pretty good. Like there were a lot of really strong moments, as Zig said.
This critique is very much just like, well, if you remove all the bad parts and leave only the good parts.
Well,
behind.
I mean, even if you did take that out, I still would have other criticisms of it. But like, there are things that I would be able to put up with, I guess. But
I mean, I mostly agree. Like, I think that there are some problems which run all the way through the show, but those problems become much more obvious when you have way less strong material. And the Crime Island arc is not great, really, in any regard. I don't think.
Yeah.
So,
but I mean, it's the premise of, for those people not familiar, it's about this immortal entity that eventually named Fushi, and who mostly takes the form of humans and learns about how humans work and all that. There's a lot of the whole sadness of immortality thing going on, and when it's firing on all cylinders, it can be very tragic and beautiful and very, poignant. And, when it's not, it's not. But
yeah.
I think I guess I don't want to just lose I want to give credit where credit is due for the parts that it does well, particularly the beginning. And as much as I didn't like the final third, the last episode is fantastic.
Yeah.
They did finish on a strong note, at
the
least.
first and last episodes are probably the best part of that, best episodes in that show, weirdly. Like, it starts really well and ends really well. And, I think that it is overall more successful than not successful. I think it has some really powerful moments. I think that they tell the stories they have pretty well. Could it have used more time, more money? All of those things, probably. But at some point, you can always say that. I think I'm one of the people who hasn't read the original material. And, like, based on this series, I would say, A, yes, I'm interested in reading the original, and B, this very much seemed like a functional adaptation rather than a disaster or a triumph.
Well, I think the reason why as someone who loves the manga, and why I came down so hard on To Your Eternity, is that, like, we've seen what a really good adaptation can do. Like, for a manga, like, if you look at our own top 10 lists in past years, our 2019 anime of the year was Beastars, right? Like, Dorohedoro hit top 3 last year. It's like, I think obviously you want to believe that, like, the strength of a source material can always come through, like,
that's
regardless.
Not always, but that's not always true.
I think we know that's not true. I think that an adaptation, like the presentation, the way it's framed, the way it's presented, can make or break a story. And I feel like, at least for my personal relationship with To Your Eternity, I feel like this adaptation broke it in a lot of ways. And I think that's unfortunate, because I think it's a story. This is like, for me, this is like my this is my most recent, like, Golden Kamui. This is a situation of this story. I think it deserves so much better, but. I will concede, though, as you guys said, I think that and maybe that's why. I think it's because when it hits, you get a glimpse of what this, like, anime could have been.
If it could always run on all cylinders like this episode.
Right. Like, what this story could have been. But I do think that, yes, overall, though, I think that its themes are largely still communicated at the end of the day, and I hope its appeal still mostly lands with people, at least enough to... convince them to read the manga, if nothing else.
Yep.
Yeah. I think it's fair to say we wouldn't want people to just write off the franchise.
Certainly
not. It's worth looking into for yourself, at the very least. All right. let's move along to number 8, where we have Wonder Egg Priority.
This might be the worst show in the top 10.
I
voted for it.
Yeah, so...
I mean, honestly, based on the ways you've talked about that show, that doesn't sound like a controversial take. I'm looking at the rest of our top 10 list, and, like, yeah, it seems like number 8 here is the one you would apply that label to.
It's so complicated. I think that the first 12 episodes of this show I might have picked as my best show of the year. I think it's really good. I think that it's beautiful, it's emotional, it tells terrific character stories. I think that it is an interesting look at a difficult subject that's handled with a great deal of sensitivity. And then there's that last episode.
But before we get too much further into it, do one of you guys want to give just like a brief summary of Wonder Egg Priority?
Sure. I mean, it's a story about a girl called Ai, who has become a shut-in, a hikikomori, a NEET, whatever you want to call it, because her best friend at school committed suicide, and she discovers a sort of weird, fantastical, magical world populated by bizarre people who claim that if she runs their weird game, then they can bring her friend back to life. And it sort of carries on from there in a very sort of surrealist, dreamy take on that premise. There are other characters. She meets other girls who have also lost people who are, trying to reclaim them. And, it sort of goes all over the place a little bit, I mean, it's one of those shows where the framing device is very much a framing device to get in there and tell stories about, death, life, redemption,
right,
interpersonal relationships and all that kind of thing. And I think it was very good at doing that, honestly. I think that there were definitely some rough patches. This was another show whose production was affected quite badly, not only by COVID, but also just by like incredibly poor scheduling and staffing and all that kind of thing. I mean, this was kind of a thing with all the shows produced by Cloverworks this year, but definitely a troubled production. And I think the final result bears the scars of that. It is extremely disjointed. It doesn't really have an ending. Like, it just sort of stops. And like, for those of you who aren't aware, like, the show ended without a concluding episode, and they put the concluding episode back 3 months to be aired in a special, and that concluding episode was extremely bad and contained some very, very bad writing, which arguably undermined everything else that the show had to say, and so it's very complicated. I think that I think that it's definitely one of the shows that I thought about the most and like enjoyed writing about the most, but it's fatally flawed in like a really heartbreaking way.
Yeah.
Like,
I think there is a parallel universe where this becomes the number one show of the year. Like, they had the talent and the ambition to do it, and for whether it was external factors or I read a lot about kind of there was a lot of discussion about.
I mean, there was apparently a creative tug of war between the writer and the director.
Right. Yeah, some conflicting messages from like the writers and the director, and like it, maybe there was not a clear vision of what they actually wanted to say, and we still get what I think are fragments of really good material, but
some of those individual episodes are barn burners. They're absolutely terrific.
Yeah. It's just we have to put that huge asterisks at the end with the finale, where I agree with everything you said, Zig. like they totally torpedo everything that they were doing.
The thing about it is not just that it's a bad episode of anime, it's that I think the ideas it promotes are harmful and dangerous and distasteful, to say the least. And, I wrote about it. I wrote about every episode of that show. You can go and read that stuff, But I think, I still wanted to vote for it. I still wanted to put it on this list. I'm glad that it's on this list, but it is just a shadow of what it could have been.
Yeah,
it's even the shadow had brilliant moments, but it's disappointing ultimately.
Yeah, one way or the other, it's a fascinating topic, and just approach it at your own risk, basically.
I would definitely recommend that people who are interested in sort of, character-focused narratives and stuff about, these fairly heavy topics about, suicide, self-harm, those kind of things. I think it has a lot of interesting things to say about those things. Just, don't really expect there to be any sort of conclusion or satisfactory answer to some of the questions it poses,
Yeah, you're not going to get the payoff at the end.
Yeah.
So,
a shame, but still definitely one of the shows I thought about the most this year.
Yeah. All right. Let's go to number 7, where we have Shadow's House. Now, this was primarily getting championed by Peter, who is unfortunately not here to talk about it. But in the interest of trying to do it justice, I actually ended up watching the first episode just to kind of get a feel for what was going on here. And I kind of liked it, the first episode. And I probably would have checked it out if it did not have the misfortune of happening in the spring season.
Oh, was it spring 2021? Yeah.
Yeah. Where there were
a tough time to come out for any anime that was not the 4 or 5 or so we were all talking about.
As we'll see when we get to our top 5, spring season was packed. But yeah, no, it's the premise is a little weird to explain. It kind of makes sense when you watch it, but there is this mansion filled with these shadow people who are essentially like silhouettes of humans wearing clothes, basically. And when these shadows come of age, they receive a copy of themselves called a doll that looks like a real human. And that doll becomes like their servant. It's very strange. And it's interesting, the tone of the show. Most of what's actually happening was like kind of... It's basically centered around this one girl who gets her shadow, and they're kind of becoming friends. And there's sort of like this real like underlying creepiness to it, because like on the surface it's just like cute little vignettes of them becoming friends, but it's like they kind of hint at there's some weird, possibly sinister things happening in the background. Right. And that's kind of, I think, where the interesting parts come into play. Like, if this girl is meant to be her copy, then why does she have her own personality and all that? And, those kinds of questions. Or like in the first episode, she's teaching her doll how to read, and the doll's trying to read these papers that I'm pretty sure she's not supposed to read, which is probably going to lead down through some other rabbit hole or something. So I don't know how like serious it gets, and there's also already a season 2 announced, so I don't know how far they even get with the story. But I thought it was a pretty unique, interesting vibe going on.
Sure, yeah, I mean,
with it, anytime you kind of get that combination of like the cute and creepy, that can be effective.
I do recall hearing that season 2 happened because season 1 was so well received, and they did not expect a season 2, and so there may have been a. My understanding is they put some story stuff from the manga in earlier than normal because they thought there would only be one season. Oh,
because they didn't think there's no way we were ever going to get a second season.
Yeah.
Well, I guess now they get to figure that out. Mm-hmm. How to just make that all mesh together smoothly in season 2.
Yeah, and aside from Peter, just most other people that I've heard have watched this have been positive about it. So, unfortunately, like I said, none of us on this podcast have actually watched it beyond the first episode here, so we can't really go too much more in depth. But
if you'd like to hear somebody who has finished it, give it, write their thoughts on it. Peter wrote the entry for Shadow's House for our top 10 posts, so you can take a look at that if you'd like to actually hear from somebody who finished it.
Yes.
They also spoke on.
Actually, I don't remember if we actually mentioned that, but there isn't a post with the top 10 where we have all written about these shows, so you can follow along at home with us. But yeah. All right. Let's go to number 6, where we have Beastars Season 2.
When this show finished, I could not imagine that it would fall as low as number 6.
Yeah, so I think if there's any single indicator of how good this season was, Beastars was our number 1 anime of 2019.
Yeah, and for what it's worth, I think this season 2 is considerably better than the first season.
I think this is as much as I was about to make a joke about how the mighty have fallen, in some regards, maybe it is a bit of an upset. I remember literally saying out loud, "Just you watch, Beastars Season 2 is going to be our number 1 anime of the year again." And I said that not knowing what kind of year Beastars Season 2, this is very much not like Beastars Season 2 is a worse season, or that it falls apart, or that it has made any critical errors. It's merely that Beastars Season 2 was facing an unprecedented level of competition in 2021.
And it did air like at the very beginning of 2021. So a lot happened since then.
This one is pretty much a 2021 show by the dint of like 2 episodes that aired this year or something.
But
so,
still,
that said, it's still very good.
Yeah, it's Beastars. For those who are unfamiliar, it is the story of an animal society in which a wolf falls in love with a rabbit and endures
even though
insane.
That plot line is barely relevant to this.
I'm trying to
season,
give I'm trying to give the 2-sentence summary here.
Yeah.
We'll just say that wolf goes through some insane trials and tribulations in the name of realizing that love. And
yes,
you're right that that's not the focus of season 2, but in many ways, Lugosi going on his quest to find Tem's killer is entirely about his love for Haru.
I'm going to disagree with something you said earlier, which is you said it's not like Beastars Season 2 falls apart, and my argument is it totally falls apart. It's just the most entertaining collapse
I don't know what you're talking
seen.
about.
I
don't know what you're talking about.
It's just it's like 12 episodes of like a car crash with drums of kerosene in the back seats.
I don't know.
Incredible.
Sure, the snake never came back, but it's fine. It's fine. We don't. We don't need an explanation.
We still don't really know what a Beastar is. So
I think the
what's a Beastar?
Oh my god! I think the enjoyable aspect of Haru Itagaki's writing with something like Beastars is just how it continues to escalate and just go weirder and weirder places, and that no normal story ever would bother going.
I mean, after the climax of this season, you could tell me the next season takes place on the moon, and I would be like, yeah, no, that makes sense, of course. Yeah. Just like it
checks out.
Just a gradually escalating in, I don't know where, it crossed the line. Was it the big snake? Was it the fucking, spirit journey? Was it...
The moth?
Yeah, was it the bit where he beats up that cheetah? There's just so many potential turning points of utter insanity.
And it's great.
Yeah, I think it's great. I think in many ways Beastars is a story where, it is a story that realizes it is picking up speed increasingly to a dangerous degree. It is doing, increasingly crazier things and realizes it can't stop. That now that it has committed to this track, it must continue.
It definitely does have that feel of kind of the momentum is carrying us along, to to hell or high water because
Right,
we just
like, we
cannot stop now.
You cannot step back from this ledge.
Well, we're already going downhill. Hit the gas.
Right,
Yeah.
like you're already in this bare-chested, bare-knuckled fist fight with this 8-foot-tall grizzly bear. We can't stop here.
So instead, what happens if we put in Super Saiyan instead?
Yeah. What if, yes. What if Legosi unlocks his Ultra Instinct?
God.
Yeah.
I love Beastars.
That
I
last
truly
episode
do.
was God.
Yeah.
I almost wish, like, selfishly, that in season 2 I was still the only person who had read the manga, just to see your fresh reactions to the climax of season 2.
Well, I mean, Zig and I still didn't read it, right? Like,
I remember reading the manga
okay.
after season 1, getting to the climax of season 2, and gasping out loud in a room alone.
Yeah, it's that kind of series.
That climax inspired the kind of incredulity in me which I've only reserved for like certain parts of JoJo before. Like,
It's
just like a complete like what? Just like a combination of like shock, glee, and total disorientation.
Yeah. I mean, again, I think credit where it's due. I think season 2 does what you want from a sequel. You know, it escalates while still maintaining all of the like familiar traits you enjoyed, you know, about its predecessor. And, you know, I think you and I can speak to, of course, there are certain quibbles we might have about this adaptation. You know, like it very much struggles from a pacing standpoint to fit its entire plot line into these like 12, 13 episodes it has.
Which is what I was going to also bring up, is that like us having that perspective also I think highlights like how actually they did a really good job adapting
they still
it.
didn't. This is what I'm talking about when I say an adaptation can make or break a show. I think Studio Orange has continued to do a really great job with Beastars.
Absolutely.
And I hope they keep it going in season 3. You know, I think
I'm so worried about season 3 though.
So am I. I am deeply concerned about season 3, but in many ways, maybe that's something to get excited about, because when I say I'm deeply concerned about season 3, it is because, y'all, it just gets fucking crazier from here, all right? Like, that's all I can really say.
Aren't they calling it the final season or something?
Yeah,
There's so much ground to cover, though.
There's a lot. Look, I'm the person who's like, if I was Mr. Netflix or whatever, Beastars would be getting 5 seasons, because I think that's the bare minimum you would actually need to smoothly land this plane. And them saying they were going to end it in its 3rd season is very much like the plane is saying, check out this sick trick, and doing a nosedive, and at the bottom where it's trying to land is like a fucking loop-de-loop ramp, and it's like, I bet I can land this.
Well,
God.
We'll see how that goes. I don't know. They killed Cowboy Bebop. Maybe money's tight at Netflix these days. I don't know. All right. Well, Beastar's still good. Let's proceed to the top 5.
Yes,
Top 5. The real heavy hitters.
Speaking of shows that are a laugh riot that have you rolling in the aisles every minute.
Oh yeah.
So before we get to the actual shows here, I just want to say, like, I feel like for our top 5, you could make a case for any of these shows being the best anime of the year, and I might not agree with you, but I'd be like, all right, I could see why you might think that.
Yeah, I agree. I would have been happy if any of these had won.
I think
it's that kind of list. So
yes.
At number 5 we have Nomad, which is Megalobox 2, the sequel to Megalobox.
Yeah. Somehow they made a sequel to Megalobox, and
somehow
it was very, very good.
And somehow despite I think all of us here agreeing when Megalobox 1 aired that it was a fully complete story, that now in hindsight, Nomad feels like
essential,
absolute necessary sequel.
Yes.
I mean, I think that's the most flattering thing you can say about any sequel, right?
Right.
Like, that it makes the original feel incomplete without it.
Yeah,
you know?
like just to quickly summarize, Nomad is the sequel to Megalobox, which is the spiritual sort of a sequel to the original classic boxing manga Ashita no Joe.
Yes. Sort of a setting, spiritual successor in a different setting for a reboot.
Yes. And Megalobox is about, again, a rough and tumble underdog boxer by the name of Joe trying to make it to the top in the sport of Megalobox, which is cybernetic boxing in a dystopian future.
Uh-huh.
And Nomad, its sequel, is about Joe's fall and subsequent redemption and his quest to find his own self-actualization and self-love in a lot of ways in this season. And I mean, just to be honest, like this is my personal number one of 2021, like the original Megalobox was. I just think Nomad, even more than the original, is like just a wholly uncompromised work in terms of the vision it is trying to realize. I just don't like it as a character piece, right? Like there's just nothing else like Nomad in its scope, in the depths it's willing to go. Like, this is a show that is dark without feeling
grim,
or exploitive.
Right, right. Yeah.
It's very adult in the way that a lot of people claim anime is, but like it very rarely is, if that makes sense. In the sense that, this feels like a very, it tackles a number of difficult emotions and subjects, and it doesn't like have nicely wrapped up answers for you. Yeah. Joe doesn't have a revelation at the first opportunity. He still does bad shit.
Crawling through the muck to reach his revelation.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think I think the reason why it ends up working in the end is because for as kind of unflinchingly grim as Nomad can get at times, the depths to which Joe sinks are truly gut wrenching to watch. It is a show that possesses an immense amount of empathy. This is an anime that never ever loses its faith in the human soul.
It's a very emotional show, despite the despite the very grim presentation. It's actually a show that is about feelings and about relationships. As trite as that sounds,
but I think that is definitely correct.
It takes a lot to have your protagonist, your viewpoint character, be positioned both sympathetically and completely in the wrong.
Yeah, the thing, not to, I don't want to spoil it, of course, but obviously, the premise of the sequel is that Joe, won the big tournament in season 1, and season 2 opens with Joe,
as a hobo,
in a very dark place, right? And I think that a lesser story would have pulled its punches, right? Or would have even done the extremely trite, oh no, Joe didn't actually mess up. He's just too hard on himself, right? And for the show to actually even call out that self-martyrdom complex that Joe has, and to get into how deeply actually selfish and self-centered, right? How for all his talks of, I couldn't bring myself to face you guys and all that stuff, how even that comes from his very sick, almost incurable sense of personal pride that he cannot bring himself to let go of. And in the ways that the best redemption stories work, Joe has to be completely broken, broken down into his constituent parts and rebuilt into something stronger and healthier and less toxic.
Right.
And
I think it does understand that I think a lot of bad redemption stuff is about the personal redemption of fixing yourself, but actual real redemption arcs have you have to pay your dues to everybody you've wronged.
Yes.
It's not just about fixing yourself. It is fixing everything you've done to other people.
Exactly, right? This is a no man is an island, right? It's very much your path to redemption also involves, not just fixing yourself, but also fixing, the external factors that you have irreparably broken. And the fact that Nomad never never pulls its punches, never flinches away from it, right? It fully commits to, like, this is the story of Joe's redemption, and these are the things he must go through to achieve it.
I think as well... Oh, sorry, Joe. Go on.
No, you actually go ahead.
I was just going to say, I think what gratifies me most about the show is that it is not afraid of being complex and of painting a complicated situation in complicated tones, you know. I mean, Joe is not all scumbag and not all hero, you know. He is a complex mix of the both. And likewise, the characters he interacts with, you know. This is not a binary situation, you know. It is not something which easily falls into the good bucket or the bad bucket, you know. And the show understands that, it embraces that, you know, and in you know, in a medium where a lot of the time that complexity is missing. I mean, actually that's unfair. In a lot of media, that complexity is missing, you know. And I think that's what makes this story feel real, is the understanding that there are layers here, you know, like difficult problems to unpick that need to be broken down on more than one level.
Definitely. And I will not spoil it, but I do have to give a shout out to its unbelievably bold choice for its ending. Like, yeah, I think we've all talked here and there, right, you know, in theory about the concept of the anticlimax. Right. Like, can you make something purposely bad so that the work becomes better as a result? And how that is like the tightest of tight ropes one can possibly walk.
Yeah.
And somehow, like, Nomad's last episode, like, in some regards not being a very good episode of anime boxing, is actually the most thematically perfect, like, thing you could do to send off the story.
Of course, like, whenever I think anytime anyone says that, it sounds like bullshit. Right?
I know, right? It sounds like bullshit, right? It sounds like, oh, the game's bad. Oh, No More Heroes open world is bad on purpose, you know? But
I mean, I will say that there's a fundamental difference between being bad on purpose in a game and being bad on purpose in a
passive media.
A passive media. But I think like describing the end of Nomad as bad on purpose is not quite correct.
You're right. I'm being redundant.
It denies the like what one normally expects of a climax for emotional effect.
Yes.
I think describing it as anticlimactic is more correct in terms of in terms of the accepted narrative, you know. But I think that is important, you know, because it shows that Joe has broken away from the cliches that ruled his life. You know, it's almost a piece of meta narrative. You know, in the sense that, you know, he does the thing that nobody expects him to do, and that ultimately is the triumph rather than the more expected.
Like, and believe me, I love it. Like, the last episode is why Nomad is my number one anime of 2021. I am truly in love with it as a narrative choice, and that's why I just felt like I had to bring it up, because I think you're right. Like, calling it bad is reductive. Like, I was mostly just using it as a shorthand, but I just think it's such a bold choice. I just feel like, I don't know, man. Like, the rest of the anime on this list are all very good, but I don't know if any of them like commits as hard to like a choice as Nomad does in its last episode. And I think that's why for me it really like earned a spot in my heart.
I think Nomad is the most character-focused of the shows that we still have to cover. You know, I mean, it is very much about the journey of this one person, and whereas season 1 was about his journey from the bottom to the top, you know, this is kind of a more nuanced journey about, you know, trying to find himself in a world where he has been to the top, and that is no longer the goal of his life. You know? And I think none of the other shows on this list can manage that, because none of them are so intently focused on, you know, the travails of this single character, and that's an incredible strength. You know, that really makes it unique and powerful.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Anyway, that's number 5.
I know, right? Like that's the truly like. I mean, this is what I'm saying, right? This is the truly insane thing about this top 5 list, right? Is like here we are singing the praises of like this unbelievable story, and we're like, well, let's move on to number 4.
Right.
That's why I'm saying everybody who's here in this top 5, like fucking give yourself a pat on the back because you could have been a number 1 in a lesser year, like without a doubt.
Yeah. Yeah, so let's move on to number 4. At number 4, we have one of 2 shows in our top 5 that kind of came out completely out of nowhere.
It Invaded presents number 4.
We have Vivy, Fluorite Eyes Song. This was, I think we all thought it was going to be some kind of like musical idol show,
right? Because I mean, it kind of is. But like, yeah, they like canned description pre-release was like,
but yeah, in the sort of like let's Gonbore our way to the top.
Yeah, and I was like,
there was the theme park stuff as well. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, and it turned out to be actually more of a time traveling sci-fi thriller type of thing. With basically the main character is kind of a super version of a theme park animatronic singing robot.
It's basically the Terminator, but with more J-pop.
Yeah, and she has to save the world from the robot apocalypse.
What if the Country Bear Jamboree had to save the world?
The Robocalypse.
Yeah, by stopping or changing certain events over the course of the next 100 years, and it's pretty great. Like I feel like this,
it's fantastic.
Yeah,
this hits so many things that I love in an anime.
I would like to start with the easy shot, which is it has been way too long since we've had some good old fashioned 1980s like pretty girl kicks ass with kung fu shit. Like once upon a time, that was the anime promise. You will have hot ladies kicking ass and doing sweet flips and neck breakers and stuff. And the fights in this are terrific. They're absolutely fantastic.
Yeah, probably I would say 2021's knife fight of the year goes to Vivy.
Yep.
Yeah, but no, you're totally right. I think the thing I love about Vivy being on this list is that Vivy is, of our top 5, probably the absolute most conventional anime of the 5.
Oh, yeah.
Like, hot girl goes on an adventure to save the day, and there's some fucking,
But the thing is,
Mamoru Oshii ass fucking navel gazing.
Yeah.
And
but the thing is, like, I'd agree with you 20 years ago, but we don't actually get many, like, super high quality original bits of sci-fi anime anymore.
You are correct.
Anymore,
yes.
yeah.
Like
if this were made in more recent times, she would have been a high school girl, and
right.
There would be all that.
It's funny how like a lot of their pre-release, some of the concept stuff they put, she's always wearing a school uniform, and then like, and she does in the like Mind Palace segments of the show, but like in the actual show, she's never in a school uniform.
It's a good red herring.
I think like and
but yeah,
I
think I'm finding as time has gone on, I've like remember the show even more fondly for some reason, but
I agree actually.
I think
we're kind of throwing out some like real superficial sounding reasons why this is a good show, but I think to Zig's point, we actually don't get shows like this very often anymore.
Yeah,
and the execution of it is just like top notch.
Yeah,
whether
and
it's
one thing I wanted to say as well is that like it's not superficial to say it's just cool. It's just a cool show.
Right.
Like, cool shit happens. Like this is the thing. Vivy is good at pretty much everything it tries. It's a decent character drama. It's a good time travel story. It's an excellent action show. It has some real good whodunit elements. It's quite funny on occasion. It is supremely all-rounded.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think Vivy is definitely like, if we gave out like Hall of Fame style awards, right? Vivy is your all rounder of the year, right? Like just solid in basically everything it tries to, And I think, but also I do want to give it credit where it's due. I think that it does leverage its premise well. I think that the stuff it does with its AI people are strong, legitimately compelling and interesting. Like, I think most of us here are at that point in our lives where we are no longer interested in asking if androids are people. We know androids are people. What can you do with them?
Right.
That is interesting, unlike what you can do with actual human beings in fiction. And
what is the point of telling the story if the androids are not human? Like, that's why you're here to begin with.
And I can appreciate a story that has the confidence to be like, you know what? Sorry, David Cage, we already answered that question like 20 years ago. Like, we have way more interesting questions we want to ask. And I think it does. Like, I think, there are some, like... what did we compare it to? Like, it was like Uchikoshi. Like there's some like
right, and your near automata.
Right, like there's some like fucking 999 ass like twists in Vivy that like. And the reason why I joked when I said It Invaded presents number 4 Vivy is that it kind of has that like that energy of just like that willingness to just commit hard to a cliffhanger.
Oh yeah,
that like
episode the like 5-6 episode arc.
Yeah,
the whole Grace arc,
which is like amplified more by the fact that this is happening over the span of 100 years. So like you could skip 20 years in between episodes.
Right. Go, what the fuck happened? Over 20.
And then you got to figure out what happened.
They do take advantage of that. Like they take advantage of that by playing with your perception of time, and even like the perception of the characters. The perception they have of each other and even themselves shifts. Like there's a very memorable mid-season twist, which I think you all know the one I'm talking about, which is like, oh, we basically like cleared the board and reset the pieces,
Yeah.
And it's they do really good work with what could be quite a cliched idea.
Yeah.
Like the whole time travel thing, like that time travel is like in my top like 3 like most tired things I'm very sick of. And they still even managed to find a way to like use that to their advantage,
Oh yeah, they totally
with the time skips and the how they handle those, and dipping into a little bit of the sadness of immortality, all that.
Yeah.
It's they even though they're doing things that on paper are conventionally sound like things that have been done before, they're doing it so well and finding their own kind of little angles with them.
Yeah,
and definitely.
Yeah,
and you know what? Shout outs to like again, even though we were just talking about how we just don't get those kind of shows where a hot girl kicks a dude's head off anymore. Like, actually, shout outs to like Vivy as a character, and like especially her partnership with Matsumoto. I think it's a pretty underrated like friendship. That as far as like anime duos go, like even in this year, I think like I really grew to love Vivy and Matsumoto's dynamic. Like, I think
they each give as good as they get.
Yeah,
I
definitely.
think that it definitely feels like Power Struggle maybe makes it sound a bit over the top, but definitely it feels like 2 smart characters fencing with each other. They both come back and forth with their debates and everything, and you see that affection growing, to the point where they do become much firmer partners, and I think it's really sharp. I think it's occasionally very funny. I think in particular Jun Fukuyama's performance as Matsumoto is excellent. He's really spiky in the right way. And, I think this is the thing, right? When shows are good at everything, every other part informs the other part. Because we care about Vivy as a character, because she is an interesting and important person to us, it's that much more satisfying when she does go around kicking dudes' heads off and throwing people out of windows and stuff like that, because it means something. She feels vulnerable in a way.
Definitely. And, hey, you know what? Those songs are pretty good, too.
Yeah. I'm always a fan of singing some kind of dramatic pop ballad over dogfighting or some other action scene. like some real heavy Macross vibes on some of these.
Right. Like I feel like the last episode reminded me why I still try to give Macross even the littlest bit of rope. Is because deep down I really do love a spectacle in which you got a girl singing a song in the middle of all of it.
that do you remember love type of vibe, but yeah.
You're in universe AMV.
Right. Yeah. So it's a good show all around. I mean, I would, anybody that's into anime, I think, would enjoy this.
I think so.
I mean, it's a very broad appeal to it as well. So, definitely worth checking out. All right, let's go to number 3, where we have the Heike Story. This is some historical fiction. Is it like an adaptation of an adaptation or something like that?
Yeah, basically. Like it is very clearly an adaptation of, the Heike Story that is the piece of fiction, and not an adaptation of the Genpei War.
Right.
I think specifically it is an adaptation of a novelization from the 50s, like the.
Oh boy.
How many layers deep are we going on
Several.
this one?
I kind of, I mean, I don't know for sure, but I kind of get the impression they kind of pick and choose what they wanted.
I believe this is
but
more specifically
so
from a novelization from from like 2016, I believe.
Oh, okay. Yeah. My bad then.
Okay.
Sorry. Yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah.
The point is that this story is well known.
Yeah, it's a historical fiction about the rise and fall of the Taira clan. So it's medieval Japan, court intrigue, all that stuff. But it is more focused on the core family that is generally removed from like the war going on, right? Yeah. And it's kind of like more their lives and how they're impacted by these decisions that are happening over their heads.
For a story about a civil war, there is remarkably little war.
One might even say that, unlike most historical fiction, the Heike Story is about the characters.
No, this was a really great series, though.
Oh yeah.
All across the board. I think this is like we talked about it so recently because it just finished, about a month ago or something.
Yeah.
And the same thing kind of still stands, where it's like I do feel like this is one of, perhaps more than any of the shows on the top 5 here, to really appreciate. You got to watch it. Like, it's very difficult to explain. On a podcast, because
like
I think
if Vivy is easy to explain because it's anime as you know it, the Heike Story is like, it's like polar opposite. It's such an ephemeral feeling, right? Like what makes it work, what makes it sing.
I think that's because we know the story and they know we know the story, if that makes sense, and so it becomes a show that is more about the things that the medium can bring to the story. So you focus on things like the acting, the visuals, the music, all of those things. And I think it does the most important thing that like historical or adaptations of well-known stories do, which is it takes the fact that what's going to happen and uses it to build the story. Like, tragedy is coming.
Yes.
This will not end well, and it uses that to increase the pathos. The inevitability of the fall, and I think that is what gives it great power. You see the disaster happening in slow motion, and you know where it will end, but you can't do anything. And these people can't do anything either.
And I think like an important aspect of that, right, is like I think obviously it's been mentioned before, but like, in all seriousness, right, like joking aside, like the Heike Story's like true, like its truest strength is its understanding of the fundamental personhood and dignity of all the characters involved in the story.
Right.
Like, even its obvious villains, even when the Heike are like unwillingly signing their own death warrant, like you still empathize with them, right? You still feel their inherent humanity, like in all the decisions they make.
Kiyomori's a piece of shit, but he sure looks like he's having a good time doing it. You know?
And like, you know, and also it's like Kiyomori may be a piece of shit, but like he is also, you know, a father and a grandfather, right?
Yeah.
He dotes, you know, on one hand he dotes on the child emperor because he sees, you know, the power he represents, but also does he dote on that child because he's an old grandpa, right?
Yeah,
like
it's, and you know, I think a huge part of the importance of the impact of this show is due to Naoko Yamada, you know, and her work. You know, I mean, I think what we've seen in her previous work, in her work with Kyoto Animation, is always that she, you know, through her direction, through her scripting and blocking and everything like that, she excels at bringing an extra humanity to characters who might otherwise be stereotypes. And that's so important here, because you're not even dealing with stereotypes here. These characters are archetypes. You know,
Right.
they are the template for 1,000, you know, heroes and villains that came afterwards, you know. And what she does so well is make you feel that humanity, you know, like we've just been saying. You know, there is just so much life in the presentation, in the broadcast. You know, it really sells that feeling of, you know, people, and that's so important for the connection. Yeah.
And I think that, like, you know, a lot of credit also must go to, like, you know, the fact that this is a collaboration between Naoko Yamada and Science Saru, right? Like, this is...
And Young Choi and the crew there.
Yes, we are talking about, like, the, you know, the Azoken people, the Devilman Crybaby people, right? Like, the you know, like, maybe one of the, like, single most talented studios out there, like, currently doing work. And I think, you know, this is not to say I don't think Kyoto Animation could have done this anime, but... You know, there are just moments, there are scenes in the Heike story, right? Especially when, like, the color scheme and the composition starts to, like, intentionally emulate, like, a woodblock print or a watercolor. That just kind of leave you, like, stunned. Like, they're so immaculately crafted.
I feel like this is
It's an exceptionally beautiful show.
I feel like this is the show with the most of the stuff here, where I was just... Stuff would happen, and I would just say, wow, this show looks great.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
And like, I think that, you know, even when it is not conventionally expensive looking, you know, when it is not necessarily moving at 100 frames a second or whatever, it still looks beautiful. And the choice of the shots means that those moments of stillness and moments of limited movement actually work for the narrative rather than against it. You know, it's definitely a show which knows sometimes when to shut up and just sort of let a moment breathe a bit, and I think that's very important for the mood as well.
Yeah. Well,
Great stuff.
I'll just mention a few things here. This actually did get just as many number one votes as our actual number one show, but as the rest of the numbers panned out, it did not make it to number one. Our top three were actually quite close on the voting. I'll just throw that out there. And
I will point out that the top three are exactly the order I put them in, so you're welcome.
Yes. So
right.
maybe Zig paid me. That's how that worked out. But
as if I have money.
Yeah. Again, any of these series at this point could have been number one. And it's like I'll volunteer for me personally. I was one of the people that voted Heike Story number one. It's very good. And everyone should definitely go check that out.
Terrific show.
All right. At number 2, we have SSSS.Dynazenon, the sequel to SSSS Gridman, although they're not terribly related when you actually watch them.
From the studio that bought you Sex and Violence with Mark Speed.
And Inferno Cop, don't forget.
Yes, and Inferno Cop,
Akira
of course.
Amamiya.
Ninja Slayer.
Inferno Cop's Akira Amamiya presents SSSS.Dynazenon.
Yes. So yes, this is a sequel to Gridman, although it definitely has its own... Like, they do a great job of... It feels like a spiritual successor, but it's definitely its own entity.
Yeah, it is sort of a show in the same oeuvre, but like calling it even a direct sequel is a little
right.
unrepresentative.
Like a lot of the presentation and stuff feels similar, like the mood feels similar, but
it literally reuses a lot of the backgrounds.
Yeah.
So.
Right. But they shift over from the cast that we had at Gridman with like the main trio to more of an ensemble type of cast.
And I mean,
and it works great.
I would argue, in comparison to the Dynazenon cast, of the trio from Gridman is like has not very much personality in comparison.
Oh, no, like it's very much a thing of like, Gridman is. I mean, I think this is why we constantly like have this trouble when we compare Gridman and Dynazenon. Is like, yeah, dude, no, Dynazenon's cast is way better than Gridman's. It's
yeah,
but also Gridman had. It's like it's.
Yep.
They both had different strong points, which is
and I think
cool.
maybe to avoid just comparing the two, we should be just highlighting just like what a great job Dynazenon does. I feel like we're saying this a lot this year, but like like Beastars, like Megalobox, like Dynazenon is a great sequel because like it echoes a lot of what made its predecessor great, but also finds like new ways to explore that material. Right? It expands on it in legitimately interesting ways, and offers a different enough message that it feels like a fresh take on something familiar.
I think, to me at least, the most fascinating part of Dynazenon is that, and I mentioned this a few times in the stuff I wrote on it, is that to all intents and purposes it is like a pure character drama / melodrama. Like even more so than Gridman, the kind of like tokusatsu / super robot stuff is almost entirely peripheral to the experience. It is there as a means to an end and an element of the weirdness, but it's such a character-focused story, and unlike other super robot shows, this one is all about the characters. And, but I think one of the best signs about this show that it is a mature, confident form of storytelling is that there are questions that don't get answered. There are questions that you're left to, take your own interpretation of. It feels like it expands beyond what we see simply on screen.
Definitely.
Yeah.
I mean, I think this is another show on this list where when we say that, like, what makes Dynazenon great is its, like, willingness to tackle, like, fairly, like, mature and adult topics, we once again, like, are saying that in the best way possible. Right,
and
like,
it does it in a mature way.
Exactly. Like, there's a willingness to confront this source material mostly uncompromised, right? Like, entirely, like, ready and committed to exploring it to its fullest. And I feel like in a lot of ways, like, that describes Dynazenon in general for me is, like, like, it is a fully committed show, right? Like, it is fully committed to telling this story about these 5 characters, right? These scarred souls, so to speak.
Do indeed shine like stars.
And, like, lending them, like, all the empathy and personhood in the world that they deserve, even if some of them get less screen time than others.
Yeah.
Like, each one of them feels like a fully developed person, with their own...
And also, even though they feel like independent, fully developed people, they also, relate to and rely upon other people in that ensemble in the same way that people, like, friendships in real life form. There becomes you can see it throughout the show. There is kind of like a maturing sort of interreliance between them.
Right. I mean,
they
literally
start getting closer together in the shots as
yes.
the show goes
I mean,
on.
like, there is some visual metaphor there as well.
I mean, like, this is all a very, like, hoity-toity way to say that Dynazenon's, like, fundamental theme is about the power of friendship. But, like, in all seriousness, it's like, it's almost like you know, if we were to do that, like, fucking meme of, like, the empty brain is the power of friendship, eventually you reach, like, you go through multiple stages as you grow up and become more, like, familiar with more sophisticated fiction, and eventually you arrive at the end point, the galaxy brain, which you have once again returned to.
Power of friendship.
The power of friendship is what saves us. You know?
Yeah.
But it really is a show that believes that, like, it's almost like its thesis statement is that very few people can overcome trauma on their own, right? We grow past grief and the things that have scarred us in the arms of each other.
And also, I think I would say that, like, there is a certain amount of, like, surface level, well, because we're good friends, now the robot is more powerful. But I think as well that for the most part, it kind of avoids those easy generalizations, you know? I mean, like, you see the characters begin to change, you see them understand their different place in the world, you know? And I think one of the important parts of that is that, you know, at the end, everything is not fixed. You know, these people are not completely better, quote unquote,
right?
Definitely,
you know. But you see progress, you see growth, you know. And, and I think
they are no longer wounded; they are just scarred.
Yeah, you know, and part of that last episode is about, like, you know, accepting. You know, I think, you know, the most important scene in that last episode is the scene where Yomogi says, "Look, you know, I will take life with all the good and the bad," you know, because you don't want, you know, you can't be safe forever if you want to live. You know, you can't lock yourself away. You have to feel things, and, you know, I think that's a point that the show makes incredibly well. You know, I'd also like to say that this is a show with a giant robot that is called both King and Kaiser, because it's just that cool.
Yeah,
and the little bits
like,
fly through the air to a brassy 70s theme, and you know.
Yeah, I do want to shout out some of the super robot antics.
Of
primarily
course,
they're pretty good.
the primarily when they play the OP and you kind of hear it muffled in the background from the cockpit.
Oh, that's so good. Yes.
Trigger.
That
but,
and
let it be said, right? Like, this is still Trigger. Like, it is Akira Amamiya's Trigger, but it is still Studio Trigger. Like, they know what you like, and they are more than happy to give it to you.
I think it's a remarkable, like, this was officially their 10th anniversary work, and I think it's a remarkable sign of how much they have evolved and matured as a studio.
Yeah, we're talking about Trigger delivering one of the most mature and nuanced casts of the year here,
right?
Which would sound crazy 10 years ago.
They have taken their existing strengths and not discarded them. They have built on them instead, you know.
Yes,
so it is still hyperkinetic. It's still occasionally very funny as well.
Totally.
Like, there's plenty of goofy stuff in it. Like,
you know, this is not. There's no reason to bring this show up even in the slightest, other than that Eero and I technically watched it in 2021.
Ninja Slayer,
but
right?
Is this Ninja Slayer?
We watched We watched Akira Amamiya's Ninja Slayer in 2021.
Yes. Just give,
and it's like,
give us perspective.
And the truly mind-blowing thing about Dynazenon is, like, you can kind of see it all in, like, the way Akira Amamiya does it, right?
He's got his secret weapon of the long pause in the middle of dialogue, which
that pause where they're eating the churros at the pool is excruciating.
And the insane thing about Akira Amamiya is that he knows how to use that trick both for drama
and comedy
and some of the funniest fucking shit you've ever seen in your life.
Right.
Yeah.
It's crazy to me how much emotion you can evoke by just going silent for 20 seconds.
Yeah.
It just depends what you say before it, right?
Yes.
I mean, that joke with the lifeguard is literally a still held frame for about 10 seconds. And
right.
It's so funny. Like,
that is some straight up Inferno Cop shit. Like, it is insane to me that this director can contain so many multitudes within him. I think we've always said it, right? Like, Akira Amamiya, like, actually maybe the most exciting thing about Dynazenon is proof that, like, Gridman wasn't a fluke, right? Like, the actual most exciting thing about Dynazenon is that this is proof that Akira Amamiya and the guys at Trigger, like, they know what made Gridman tick.
They did it deliberately. They did it
Exactly.
deliberately. Yeah.
Like, they could do it again. And now that means that, hopefully, when Gridman Cross Dynazenon comes out, that they can do it a third time, too.
Yeah.
Like, and that's...
And I mean, one of the things, again, like I wrote this in like my wrap up of the show, but you look at this show and then you look at Kisniver, which was like only like 5 years earlier or something like that, and like it's just like a quantum leap in terms of, you know, how refined the storytelling is, how they're able to juggle the various strengths of the studio and like integrate the goofy and the wacky and the bombastic in a much more sympathetic and you know, a way which melds much better, you know. And you think about the progress that they have made in that time, and then you think about what if they make that progress again, you know. And that's what's so exciting, you know. I think that like this proves the sky is the limit for those guys, you know, and I'm really excited to see where they take it next.
I will say I would like to see Amamiya do something else in the near future.
I would agree.
I know they're doing the Gridman Cross Dynazenon, but after that, I would like to see him. You know, I mean, he clearly can do.
Yeah.
I mean, he can clearly has talent to do so many different types of genres and moods here that we've seen encapsulated in this series.
I think he will get his chance. You know, like, he is a name now in the same way that some of that studio's more famous directors were originally, you know, and I think that they will let him spread his wings after a while.
Yeah. All right. Well, that brings us to number 1, the other show in our top 5 that came absolutely out of nowhere.
Yeah, I feel like this is a...
Can I start by telling a story here?
Well, can we name the show first?
No, because I'm going to name it in the course.
All right.
Thing.
Okay.
So I was responsible for scheduling the first looks for the spring season, and for those of you who don't know, we write a quick intro to the first episode of every show we deem interesting or relevant, you know. And, you know, generally when we go into a season, we kind of know the stuff that's going to be interesting and the stuff that is maybe not so interesting, and so I try and parcel everything out so that everybody gets something fairly interesting, and you know, then, you know, maybe everybody gets some isekai trash that they have to do. And and this show was so anonymous that I forgot it not once but twice in my initial scheduling, and eventually I noticed and I was like, oh, this weird show about an animal taxi driver, I guess we'll give that to Iroh, you know, and I didn't think about it again until I joined him in watching that first episode of Odd Taxi, and man,
yeah. So I will agree. When you look at the preview or whatever, I thought this was going to be like a 2-minute short or something.
Yeah,
like,
I thought it was like an 8-minute short or something.
Yeah,
like,
and no, it was a it's full anime. It is well, how would you explain Odd Taxi? There is a
I mean, I think you could start with
taxi
like
driver
kind of the high level. Yeah,
that is a walrus, and he gets tied up into some kind of murder mystery. Is that about as high level as we could make it?
The way I've tried to sell it to
part
people is like, because I've actually been engaged in several conversations in the last couple of weeks where I've tried to explain Odd Taxi to people, is that Odd Taxi uses its animal people like facade to be like, you know, a true slice of life series in the sense of this is like a collection of like interconnected vignettes about various people living in modern Tokyo and kind of exploring, you know, the things that these people do to kind of cope and survive with, you know, living in the modern day, you know, and like some of that cope is, you know, getting into gacha games, and for other people that cope is rapping while committing extortion.
Yep.
That tracks.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of characters, and the way they manage to all have their own story and then it all kind of connects together is probably like the single most impressive thing to me. The way they've managed to weave all the stories together in a way that like works without
when describing it. Oh, sorry, Joe. Go on.
I was gonna say without feeling like we left anything out, or something wasn't covered, or somebody needed more screen time or whatever. It was a very interesting balancing act that they managed to pull off. But yeah, go ahead, Zig.
I mean, when I've been describing it to people, I've sometimes been describing it as like a sort of noirish piece, because I think it does have a lot of that atmosphere to it. It has that kind of weird collection of like various assorted scumbags and also just kind of like the swirling mystery that gradually links them all together. I think that it's just a masterclass in how you sort of develop your plot and sort of build your characters up step by step, and it's a terrific show at sort of connecting unforeseen plot pieces together in a way that makes you go, oh no, you just see kind of like the the one I always reference is the end of episode 4, where like episode 4 is mostly a completely disconnected story about this dude who got swindled on eBay when he was a kid and grew up to be addicted to gacha games. But at the end of that episode, it just connects back to the main story in just a way that makes your blood run cold. It is absolutely fantastic, and the show just does that time and time again.
It's like every line of dialogue is relevant somehow. It will come back around.
And also, it just it has a tremendous sense of like G said, sort of a realist slice of life. It is a very lived-in feeling universe. Like these people have real problems, they have real struggles. There's the comedians who like are perpetual failures and are thinking about breaking up. There's the manager who's trying to manage his idol band while he's got his fingers in like 3 other pies, most of them illegal, and all that stuff. And it never feels outlandish or like absurd, even though there are lots of outlandish and absurdist elements in it. Like the rapping porcupine who rides around on a scooter. But
the fact that everyone is an animal.
Yes, the fact that everyone is an animal. But that stuff just sort of builds the atmosphere rather than detracts it. Like it feels like it kind of has a similar feeling to some of Beastars, in the sense that kind of like you feel like this story is going out of control in the best possible way. Like that feels like the tracks have been taken out from underneath you and you're flying completely in the dark, and I think that's just a tremendous quality to have to a story.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of hard to say too much more without spoiling things.
I mean, it's a show it's a show you really don't want to spoil, right?
Yeah.
It's real.
I will say,
the less you know going in, the better.
I will say this: I personally kind of thought when they reveal Otakawa's the truth of Otakawa, let's say, toward the end, I thought that was kind of lame, but they bailed it out with a fantastic final moment of the series.
I think they
like
kind of know that
ending.
Because that reveal about Otakawa is kind of underplayed, to be honest. And I think by that point you're not really meant to take it as an enormous twist. I think that
I would agree.
I think that and the fact is the story actually continues for quite a lot after that point, so it just kind of feels like the natural culmination of what we've been seeing, rather than a big twist moment.
Right.
Right. But yeah, definitely.
Yeah, just immaculately constructed.
Yeah, very like I don't know if this is the right word, but it's a show that the writing just feels tight, right? Like even when they are like rambling, right? Even when they are just like talking like regular people, it is all contributing to like the grander artifice, right? Like almost every line, like has some kind of payoff, and if it doesn't, then it's just adding texture to the setting as a whole.
Right.
And
yeah. I mean, so many of those conversations are just there to like give you a feel of these characters. You
Right.
know, like I said, every word is constructed to tell you something. You know, whether it's about the plot or whether it's just about the person who's speaking. You know, because I mean, we talk about like the rapping porcupine Yano, but like even the rapping serves a purpose, right? Like it shows that he treats these terrible things he does as like a goofy game. You know, he's so disrespectful. He's so flippant. He's so.
Did we mention he's also riding a razor scooter?
Yeah, I did.
We
mention
mentioned that.
Okay, yes.
But like he's so full of like self-importance and braggadocio, you know, like, and that is conveyed in the form of this really funny joke that also gets that across, you know, and that is just terrific writing. You know, you get so many facets of the character just from that one creative choice.
So, somewhat unrelated, but we did also get some great music out of this show.
Oh yeah, no, shout outs to the OP, maybe OP of the
Terrific.
year. Well, damn, there's some good OPs. I don't know, maybe
It's in there. It's in the conversation. Sure.
Vivy and Odd Taxi gonna have that knife fight in the back alley, I guess. But
yeah, and the tracks from the rapping porcupine guy outside of the show were probably better than inside the show, but
quite good. No, Yano's actual voice actor's rapping career is actually legitimately fairly impressive.
it's some pretty strong tracks. But yeah, no, I think if Vivy is the most conventional quote unquote anime series on our top 5, Odd Taxi is definitely something very different. Like even just in the art style and like they don't look like, you know, stereotypical anime people. They're all, you know, animals.
Right. But even the animals are not anime style.
Right. It's not like they're, you know, it's not like anime cat girl, you know, they look like Animal Crossing characters or something like that, right? It's definitely a very different experience than what you might normally expect from watching an anime. So it's definitely a unique and very well made experience.
Yeah, it's definitely Odd Taxi is definitely the one I bring up to people who I think like are convinced that they've seen it all, or, you know, are convinced that like they've seen what anime can do and can offer.
Right.
And I'm over here being like, all right, but you haven't watched Odd Taxi yet, have you?
Yeah.
And I think that's so important. You know, I think one of the reasons we like this show so much is that it is a breath of fresh air. You know, it feels so unique. It feels so distinct from everything that comes before, which is, you know, obviously it takes tropes, it takes story ideas, it takes aesthetic choices from media of the past, you know, Western as well as Eastern media, but the whole is something that is super unique, and that's a huge part of the appeal, I think.
Yeah. All right. Well, that's the end of our list. Those are our 10 best anime of 2021. We'll reconvene next year to name Ranking of Kings best anime of 2022. I'm just going to put that out there.
After a strong start, at least.
Yeah.
Yeah, just for the record, we did not vote for it because it is continuing into this coming season. So
the rule has always been that we vote for shows in the year that they finish. So
yeah, we kind of have a rule for that where we prefer to not include those until they're completely done. So I think that's going to be a strong contender, even though it's very early. I saw I finally watched they put out a PV for the second season, even though it's kind of continuing uninterrupted. And I've never been this hyped for a series I'm already watching. Like,
I know, right? Like it's
so
there's something cool about coming to love a show so much that when you see like the trailer advertising the next like entry, and you're just like,
it's going.
Oh
places.
man, that guy's doing that thing, and why is that guy screaming so loudly? And
so yes, everybody get on that train for next season. But
how many more demon dogs is Dorsch going to kill by the end of this season?
Oh man.
With it. So yeah, that's gonna do it though for 2021. We can finally just put that to rest and move on with our lives, and we'll see everybody in 2022.
Yeah, good job 2021. At least in terms of anime, you
very specific,
yes,
very
not anything,
specific.
literally nothing else. But yes. So
you got the most important thing right.
Yeah. All right, so our normal housekeeping, you can check us out at theglorioblog.com. Please do, because we have posts up for all of our year-end reviews, so everyone does their own individual, whatever they want to write about that happened in 2021. So those are live, in addition to, of course, the actual top 10 post where we write about the individual shows. So you can get a little more insight, especially on the shows that, us four didn't watch. You can check that out. And, yep, you can follow us on Twitter at the GLORIO blog. You can subscribe to the podcast on iTunes, Google Play, Spotify, Amazon Music, Podbean, Stitcher, and of course on YouTube, where you can like, comment, subscribe, ring the bell, do all that stuff. Tell your friends, tell your enemies, and we'll catch everybody next time.